Hi, good to be back. Today we shall be reading Chapter 31, Stalemate. Absolute decimation, crowed Vidunmali. We should now chase those imbeciles and finish off what's left of the fraud's army. They should learn that nobody invades our fair motherland. Vidunmali had joined Daksha, Vrigu, Parvateshwar and Kanakhala in the emperor's private office. Though brigadiers did not normally participate in strategy meetings, Daksha had insisted that he be allowed to attend, keeping in mind his sterling role in providing the information about the elephants. Parvateshwar raised his hand to silence Vidunmali. Let's not go ahead of ourselves, Vidunmali. Remember, Sati's tactics under pressure were exceptional. She managed to save most of her army. So it's not as if we'll have a huge numerical advantage if we chase them. Vidunmali fumed silently, keeping his eyes pinned on the floor. Praise for a rival general? What is wrong with Lord Parvateshwar? She may have been a Meluhan princess once, but now she is a sworn enemy of our motherland. And we should not forget, said Kanakhala, that the Nilkant is sailing down from the north with a large army. The safest place for our army right now is within this fort walls. Nilkant, fumed Vidunmali silently, unwilling to argue openly with senior officers of the empire. He's not the Nilkant, he's our enemy, and our army should be fighting, not keeping itself safe behind walls. Kanakhala is right, said Daksha. We should keep our army here and attack the fraud Nilkant the moment his ships dock. That coward left my daughter to fight alone, while he went gallivanting up the Yamuna. He should pay for his cowardice. Vidunmali couldn't believe what he was hearing. Does anyone here put Meluha's interest above all else? Let's worry about Meluha instead of Princess Sati and her husband's duties towards her, said Vrigu. Lord Parvateshwar is right. We have won a great victory, but we should measure our next steps carefully. What do you suggest, General? My lord, we have taken out their elephant corps and cavalry, said Parvateshwar. Sati's army is in retreat. Hence I do not expect the Nilkant to stop and attack us here. Of course he won't, quipped Daksha. He's a coward. Your Highness, said Vrigu, barely hiding his irritation. The Maharishi turned to Parvateshwar. Why won't he stop here, General? My scouts have sent back confirmation of our earlier estimates of Ganesh's army, said Parvateshwar. They do have 150,000 soldiers. That is a big army, but it's not enough to defeat our forces if we remain within our fort walls, given that Sati's forces are no longer available to augment them. And for our defensive positions, we can slowly wear his army down. Therefore, the Nilkant will not want to commit to a long siege here. He'll gain nothing and will unnecessarily lose men. So what do you think he will do? He will sail past Devagiri and join with Sati's army, perhaps in Mrittikavati or Lothal. Then we should attack their ships, interrupted Daksha. That will be difficult, Your Highness, said Parvateshwar. Their ships are sailing down river. We will have to march on road, since there are no warships on the Saraswati under our control. They will have the advantage of speed. We will not be able to catch up. So where should we attack them? Asked Vrigu. If we have to attack, I would prefer to do so at Mrittikavati. Why? Lothal is not a good idea. I have designed the defences of Lothal myself, and sacrificing false modesty, I will say that those defences are solid. We would need a 10-to-1 advantage in soldiers to conquer Lothal. We don't have that. We will be pitting 80,000 of our men against more than 200,000 of the joint Sati Ganesh army. Attacking Lothal will be a disaster for us. We will lose too many men. On the other hand, Mritikavati's defenses do not require that kind of numerical advantage. Also, we have 20,000 of our own soldiers within Mritikavati. I agree, they may be imprisoned, but if they find out that their brother Meluhan soldiers are besieging the city, they may create a lot of trouble for the Lord from within. Having said that, I would expect the Lord to retreat to Lothal, and not Mritikavati, for this very reason. Vrigu had an inkling that Parvateshwar preferred an altogether different strategy. I get the feeling that you would choose not to attack at all. Not attack at all? Asked a surprised Daksha. Why not? Our army has tasted victory. Parvateshwar, you should... Your Highness, interrupted Vrigu. Perhaps we should leave it to an expert like Lord Parvateshwar to suggest what we should do. Go on, General. The reason I suggest we avoid aggression right now is that the Lord Nilkant would hope that we attack, said Parvateshwar. One cannot attack a well-defended fort without the advantage of numbers. We don't have that. So by attacking them, we'll gain nothing and lose too many men. So I say that we stay within the safe walls of Devagiri. If we wait for 6 more months, Ayodhya's army will get here. Combined with their 300,000 soldiers, we will have a huge numerical advantage over the Lord's army. So are you suggesting that we sit around like cowards? Asked Daksha. It would not be cowardly to refrain from attacking when the situation is not in our favor, said Vrigu, before turning back to Parvateshwar. Go on, General. Once Ayodhya's troops come in, we should march to Karachapa, said Parvateshwar. We still have control over the Indus command of our navy. Along with Ayodhya's soldiers, we will have a 400,000 strong army. Combine that with the vastly superior naval fleet that we have in the Indus, and we can mount a very solid attack on Lothal. What you are saying appears to make sense, said Vrigu, before turning to Daksha. I suggest that we follow Lord Parvateshwar's strategy, Your Highness. Daksha immediately nodded his assent, but Vidyun Mali could guess that the Emperor's heart was not in his decision. He wondered if there was an opportunity for him to convince the Emperor of a more aggressive course of action. The stunned army of Ganesh was transfixed by the devastation on the hilly battlefield south of Devagiri as they sailed down the Saraswati. Bloated carcasses of elephants and horses littered the hill, flies buzzing around them. Crows and vultures fought viciously over the beasts' entrails, even though there were enough corpses around for them all. The squawking and cawing of the feasting birds added pathos to the macabre scene. Of particular interest to the soldiers, though, was the fact that there was no human dead bodies on the battlefield. The Meluhans, true to their honorable traditions, had in all likelihood conducted funeral ceremonies for all their enemy warriors. Also, they noticed that there was no debris in the Saraswati. That meant Sati's ships had escaped the devastation, hopefully with most of her army intact. Shiva stood on the deck of the lead ship, surveying the battlefield along with his sons and sister-in-law. He knew that he couldn't stop now and engage in a battle at Devagiri. He simply didn't have the strength of numbers anymore. He had to retreat farther south and find what was left of Sati's army. His scouts had already told him that the devastation looked worse than it actually must have been. Most of the infantrymen in Sati's army had survived, and her ships were sailing south to safety. Shiva knew that with much of Sati's army intact, he still had a fighting chance in the war, but he would have to reformulate his strategy. All that was for later, though. His mind was seized for the moment with one thought alone. Was his Sati all right? Was she hurt? Was she alive? Nilkant? Said Gopal, rushing up to Shiva. He had just received word from a Vasudev Pandit envoy who was hiding on the eastern bank of the Saraswati, waiting for Shiva's ships to arrive. Lady Sati was still alive when she was pulled aboard one of the retreating ships. Still alive? What do you mean? She was badly injured, Shiva. She personally led the cavalry against the rampaging elephants and Meluha's own horsemen. Nandi and Veerbhadra managed to pull her to safety. She was unconscious by the time she reached the ship. Unfortunately, the man I talked to didn't have any further information. Shiva made his decision immediately. He knew that his naval formation would only be able to sail as quickly as the slowest ship. He couldn't wait that long. Ganesh, I'm taking the fastest ship and sailing down south. I have to find your mother's ship. Kali, Karthik and you will remain with the fleet. Avoid all battles, sail as quickly as you can and meet me at Mritikavati. Ganesh and Karthik stood mute, sick with worry about their mother. She's alive, said Shiva, holding his son's shoulders. I know she's alive. She cannot die without me. Shiva's ship had raced down the Saraswati and caught up with Sati's retreating fleet. He had clambered aboard his wife's ship to discover that his Sati was out of danger now, but still bedridden. However, this relief was accompanied by some terrible news received from a Vasudev Pandit. Reports of the devastation of Sati's army in Devagiri had given the Meluhan prisoners of war in Mritikavati the courage to challenge their citizen captors. They had broken out of their prison and taken control of the city. 3,000 citizens loyal to the Nilkant had died in the process. Shiva had no choice but to avoid Mritikavati for now, as it was no longer safe for his army. He decided to sail down another tributary of the Saraswati and then retreat to Lothal. Orders had been conveyed through a Vasudev Pandit to Ganesha's army as well. For the moment though, Shiva remained on Sati's ship as it sailed down the Saraswati. Having checked on the naval movements with the captain, Shiva descended to Sati's cabin. Ayurvati sat by her bedside, applying soothing herbs on Sati's burnt face. Quickly and efficiently she tied a bandage of neem leaves. This will ensure that your wound doesn't get infected. Sati nodded politely. Thank you, Ayurvati ji. Thank you, Ayurvati ji. Also, continued Ayurvati, thinking Sati may be concerned about the ugly mark which covered nearly a quarter of her face. Don't worry about the scar. Whenever you are ready, I will perform a cosmetic surgery to smoothen out your skin. Sati nodded, her lips pursed tight. Ayurvati looked at Shiva and then back at Sati. Take care, my child. Thank you again, Ayurvati ji, said Sati, unable to smile due to the scar tissue forming on her face. Ayurvati quickly walked out of the cabin. Shiva went down on his knees and held her hand. I'm sorry, Shiva, I failed you. Please stop saying that again and again, said Shiva. I have been told about the way our elephants reacted to the burning chili. It's a miracle that you managed to save as many of our people as you did. You're just being kind because I'm your wife. We have lost our elephant corps and most of our cavalry. This is a disaster. Why are you so hard on yourself? What happened at Devagiri was not your fault. We had lost our elephant corps the moment the Meluhans discovered that the smoke from burning chilies sends them into a state of panic. But I should have withdrawn earlier. You withdrew as soon as you saw the effects on the elephants. You had no choice but to go in with the cavalry. Otherwise our soldiers would have got massacred. Practically our entire army is still intact. You did a great job to ensure that we didn't suffer even higher casualties. Sati looked away, unhappily, still feeling terribly guilty. Shiva touched her forehead gently. Sweetheart, listen to me. Leave me alone for a while, Shiva. Sati. Shiva, please. Please leave me alone. Shiva kissed Sati gently. It's not your fault. There are usually enough tragedies in life that we are genuinely responsible for. Feel guilty about them, for sure, but there is no point in burdening your heart with guilt over events that are not your fault. Sati turned to Shiva with a tortured expression. And what about you, Shiva? Do you really think a 6-year-old child could have done anything to save that woman at Kailash? It was Shiva's turn to be silent. The honest answer is no, said Sati. And yet you carry that guilt, don't you? Why? Because you expected more from yourself. Shiva's eyes welled up with the agony of that childhood memory. There wasn't a day in his life when he didn't silently apologize to that woman he hadn't been able to save. The woman he hadn't even tried to save. I expected more from myself as well, said Sati, her eyes moist. They empathized with each other in a silent embrace. Shiva and Sati's convoy of ships had just reached the last navigable point on this distributary of the Saraswati. From here on, the river was too shallow for the ships. Even farther, the Saraswati ran dry on land itself, unable to push through to the sea. Shiva had avoided the distributary which led to Mrittikavati. He was on the southernmost part of the inland mouth of the Saraswati. From here on, his army would march to the frontier stronghold of Lothal. Leaving the empty ships behind was fraught with risk. It was only a matter of time before the Meluhans will get to know about it. Shiva would, in fact, be handing over 25 well-fitted military ships back to the Meluhans, which would allow them to move their army up and down the Saraswati with frightening speed. The decision was obvious. The ships had to be destroyed. Once his entire army had disembarked and the caravan that would march on to Lothal had been readied, Shiva gave orders for the ships to be burned. Fortunately, there had been a break in the rains, which had arrived early this year, allowing the fire to consume the ships quickly. Shiva stood observing the massive flames. He didn't hear Gopal and Chinardhwaj as they stepped up to him. Lord Agni consumes things rapidly, said Gopal. Shiva looked at Gopal before turning back to the burning ships. We have no choice, Panditji. No, we don't. What do you suggest we do, Panditji? Asked Shiva. The rainy season is here, said Gopal. It will be difficult to mount a campaign to attack Devagiri any time soon. Even if we could, without the advantage of our cavalry, it is unlikely that we will be able to conquer a well-designed citadel like Devagiri. But it will be difficult for them to attack us in Lothal as well, said Shiva. Lothal in fact is better designed for defense than even Devagiri. True, said Gopal. So it is a stalemate, which suits the Meluhans just fine, since all they will have to do is wait for the Ayodhyan forces to reach Meluha. They could be here in as little as 6 months. Silently, Shiva gazed at the burning ships, contemplating this unhappy turn of events. Chinardhwaj spoke up. I have a suggestion, my lord. Shiva turned to Chinardhwaj with a frown. We can draw up a crack force of Nagas and my troops, said Chinardhwaj. The commandos will attack the Somras factory stealthily. It will be a suicide mission, but we will destroy it. No, said Shiva. Why, my lord? Because Parvateshwar will certainly be prepared for that. He's not an idiot. It will be a suicide mission all right, but not a successful one. There is one other way, whispered Gopal. The Vayuputras? Asked Shiva. Yes. Shiva looked back at the burning ships, his expression inscrutable. The Vayuputras appeared to be the only recourse now.